Okay, so magandang hapon sa lahat. Ito pa rin ang inyong Lolo Ray at magbabasa-basa na naman ako ng libro tungkol sa batas. Ang babasahin po natin ngayon ay ang Civil Code, Book 2, Title 6 tayo magsisimula dahil natapos na natin yung Title 5, yung Title 1 to Title 5, no? Ng Book 2, okay? So, simulan na natin, okay? Title 6, Usufruct. Pero bago ang lahat, wait lang. Merong message. Okay. 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 Sige. Okay. Title 6 of the Civil Code, Book 2, Usufruct in General. Article 562. Usufruct gives a right to enjoy the property of another, while the obligation of preserving its form and substance, unless the title constituting it or the law otherwise provides. So sabi niya, yung usufruct daw ay nagbibigay ng karapatan sa isang tao para i-enjoy ang isang property o pag-aari ng isa, with the obligation of preserving its form and substance. Yun unless the title constituting it or the law otherwise provides. Article 563, usufruct is constituted by law. Okay, law po ang nagko-constitute niyan. Hindi mo pwedeng sabihin isa kang usufructor ba yung tawag diyan, or under ka ng isang usufruct agreement nang hindi ito constituted by law, by the will of private persons, expressed in acts inter vivos or in a last will and testament, and by prescription. Okay. So para sa ating mga ordinaryong tao, para lubos nating maintindihan yung provision na yun ng batas, ano ba ibig sabihin ng inter vivos? So hanapin natin. Inter vivos. Ano ibig sabihin ng inter vivos? Ang ibig sabihin nito ay given between living people, or special, ang adjective niya ito especially of a gift as opposed to a legacy, given between living people. Yun ang kanyang kahulugan. Given o ibinigay between mga nabubuhay na nilalang o ng tao. Okay? So yun ang ibig niya sabihin. Okay, Article 563. Usufruct is constituted by law. Ayun pala, nabasa na natin yan. By the will of private persons expressed in acts between living persons. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng inter vivos, or in a last will and testament, and by prescription. Article 564. Usufruct may be constituted on the whole or a part of the fruits of the thing in favor of one more persons. One or more siguro ang ibig sabihin dito. Simultaneously or successively, and in every case, from or to a certain day, purely or conditionally, period. It may also be constituted on a right provided it is not strictly personal or intransmissible. Okay? So, pwede raw bahagi lamang. Okay? Article 565, the rights and obligations of the usufructuary, yun ang tawag, shall be those provided in the title constituting the usufruct. In default of such title, or in case it is deficient, the provisions contained in the two following chapters shall be observed. So kung kulang yun nakalagay sa title, okay, ito yung mga pangyayari. Magbasahin na natin yung chapter 2 para mas maintindihan pa natin yung rights of the usufructuary. Article 566, the usufructuary shall be entitled to all the natural, industrial, and civil fruits of the property in usufruct. With respect to hidden treasure which may be found on the land or tenement, he shall be considered a stranger. Okay? Stranger ka. So, ibig sabihin, mag-a-apply yung binasa natin noong nakaraan na wala kang karapatan dun sa natural treasure na makikita mo ron. National treasure. Doon sa hidden treasure na makikita mo doon. Article 567, natural or industrial fruits growing at the time the usufruct begins belong to the usufructuary. Those growing at the time the usufruct terminates belong to the owner. In the preceding cases, the usufructuary at the beginning of the usufruct has no obligation to refund to the owner any expenses incurred, but the owner shall be obliged to reimburse at the termination of the usufruct from the proceeds of the growing fruits the ordinary expenses of cultivation for seed and other similar expenses incurred by usufructuary. The provisions of this article shall not prejudice the rights of third persons acquired either at the beginning or at the termination of the usufruct. Article 568, if the usufructuary has leased the lands or tenements given in usufruct, and the usufruct should expire before the termination of the lease, he or his heirs and successors shall receive only the proportionate share of the rent that must be paid by the lessee. Okay? So kung yun daw usufructuary, pinaupahan niya o pinarenta niya yung land o yung tenement, pinarentahan niya yun. And the usufruct should expire before the termination of the lease, he or his heirs and successors shall receive only the proportionate share of the rent that must be paid by the lessee. Proportion lang. Hindi niya makukuha syempre yung upa na buo. Okay? May share lang siya. Article 569, civil fruits are deemed to accrue daily. Ito yung mga renta, payment ng lease, yan yung civil fruits. And belong to the usufructuary in proportion to the time the usufruct may last. Hanggang dun lamang sa tagal ng term ng usufruct. Article 570, whenever a usufruct is constituted on the right to receive a rent or periodical pension, whether in money or in fruits, or in the interest or bonds or securities payable to bearer, each payment due shall be considered as the proceeds or fruits of such right, period. Whenever it consists in the enjoyment or of benefits accruing from a participation in any industrial or commercial enterprise, the date of the distribution of which is not fixed, such benefits shall have the same character. In either case, they shall be distributed as civil fruits and shall be applied in the manner prescribed in the preceding article. Okay. Article 571, the usufructuary shall have the right to enjoy any increase with the thing in usufruct may acquire through accession. Ayan, yung nadagdagan yung lupa mo kunwari dahil nagtangay ang isang ilog kunwari patungo sa iyo ng lupa. The servitudes established in its favor and in general all the benefits inherent therein. Article 572, the usufructuary may personally enjoy the thing in usufruct, lease it to another, pwede niya pala itong paupahan talaga, or alienate his right of usufruct even by a gratuitous title. So pwede niyang i-alienate o anong tawag dito? Ibenta? Ganun ba ibig sabihin dito? Hindi naman sell ang ginamit na term eh. But all the contracts you may enter into as such usufructuary shall terminate upon the expiration of the usufruct, saving leases of rural lands which shall be considered as subsisting during the agricultural year. Hindi pa rin ganun kalinaw sa akin itong usufruct na ito. Article 573, whenever the usufruct includes things which without being consumed gradually deteriorate through wear and tear, the usufructuary shall have the right to make use thereof in accordance with the purpose for which they are intended and shall not be obliged to return them at the termination of the usufruct except in their condition at that time. But he shall be obliged to indemnify the owner for any deterioration they may have suffered by reason of his fraud or negligence. Article 574, whenever the usufruct includes things which cannot be used without being consumed, the usufructuary shall have the right to make use of them under the obligation of paying their appraised value at the termination of the usufruct if they were appraised when delivered. In case they were not appraised, he shall have the right to return at the same quantity and quality or pay their current price at the time the usufruct ceases. Article 575, the usufructuary or fruit of fruit-bearing trees and shrubs may make use of the dead trunks and even of those cut off or uprooted by accident under the obligation to replace them with new plants. Article 576. If in consequence of a calamity or extraordinary event, the trees or shrubs shall have disappeared in such considerable number that it would not be possible or it would be too burdensome to replace them, the usufructuary may leave the dead, fallen, or uprooted trunks at the disposal of the owner and demand that the latter remove them and clear the land. Okay? Article 577. The usufructuary of woodland may enjoy all the benefits which it may produce according to its nature. If the woodland is a copse or consists of timber for building, the usufructuary may do such ordinary cutting or felling as the owner was in the habit of doing, and in default of this, he may do so in accordance with the custom of the place as to the manner, amount, and season. Okay. Pwede niya raw putulin yung mga puno, patumbahin ito sa manner na ginagawa dati ng may-ari, no? In any case, the felling or cutting of trees shall be made in such manner as not to prejudice o hindi perwisyuhin yung preservation ng land. In nurseries, the usufructuary may make the necessary thinnings in order that the remaining trees may properly grow. Pwede niyang triman-triman para lumago yung puno. With the exception of the provisions of the preceding paragraphs, the usufructuary cannot cut down trees unless it be to restore or improve some of the things in usufruct, and in such case shall first inform the owner of the necessity for the work. Article 578. The usufructuary of an action to recover real property or a real right or any movable property has the right to bring the action and to oblige the owner thereof to give him in the authority for this purpose and to furnish him whatever proof he may have. If in consequence of the enforcement of the action he acquires the thing claimed, the usufruct shall be limited to the fruits, the dominion remaining with the owner. Article 579. The usufructuary may make on the property held in usufruct such useful improvements or expenses for mere pleasure as he may deem proper, provided he does not alter its form or substance. But he shall have no right to be indemnified therefor. He may, however, remove such improvements should it be possible to do so without damage to the property. Article 580. The usufructuary may set off the improvements he may have made on the property against any damage to the same. Article 581. The owner of the property, the usufruct of which is held by another, may alienate it, but he cannot alter its form or substance or do anything thereon which may be prejudicial to the usufructuary. So, hindi ka pwedeng gumawa ng something na makakasagabal o hindi ka nais-nais para dun sa usufructuary. Article 582. The usufructuary of a part of a thing held in common shall exercise all the rights pertaining to the owner thereof with respect to the administration, the collection of fruits of or interest. Should the co-ownership cease by reason of the division of the thing held in common, the usufruct of the part allotted to the co-owner shall belong to the usufructuary. Chapter 3, ito yung mga obligasyon of the usufructuary. Kumbaga kung sa contract of lease, ito yung nangungupahan. Ito naman yung obligasyon ng usufructuary. Article 583, the usufructuary before entering upon the enjoyment of the property is obliged, number 1, to make, after notice to the owner or his legitimate representative, an inventory of all the property which shall contain an appraisal of the movables and the description of the condition of the immovables. Number 2, to give security, binding himself to fulfill the obligations imposed upon him in accordance with this chapter. To give security. Ibig sabihin, pwede siya magbayad ng may collateral, parang ganon, or pera, pwede rin ganon. Article 584. The provisions of number 2 of the preceding article shall not apply to the donor who has reserved the usufruct of the property donated or to the parents who are usufructuaries of their children's property except when the parents contract a second marriage. Okay. Mga simpleng ganito, masalimuot din, ano? Article 585, the usufructuary, whatever may B. The title of the usufruct may be may be excused from the obligation of making an inventory or giving security when no one will be injured thereby. Article 586. Should the usufructuary fail to give security in cases in which he is bound to give it, the owner may demand that the immovables be placed under administration, that the movables be sold, that the public bonds, instruments of credit payable to order or to bearer be converted into registered certificates or deposited in a bank of public institution, and that the capital or sums in cash and the proceeds of the sale of the movable property be invested in safe securities. The interest on the proceeds of the sale of the movables and that on public securities and bonds and the proceeds of the property placed under administration shall belong to the usufructuary. So, yung interest daw on the proceeds of the sale, mapupunta yun sa usufructuary. Furthermore, the owner may, if he so prefers, until the usufructuary gives security or is excused from so doing, retain in his possession the property in usufruct as administrator, subject to the obligation to deliver to the usufructuary the net proceeds thereof, after deducting the sums which may be agreed upon or judicially allowed him for such administration. O, sa instance na ito, naging administrator yung owner. Kasi walang pang down o walang pang secure, walang pang, alam mo yon, collateral, parang ganong sense. Yung usufructuary, so administrator muna si owner. Okay. Pero yung owner na administrator, kailangan niyang, may obligation siya to deliver to the usufructuary the net proceeds thereof after deducting the sums which may be agreed upon or yung judicially allowed, yung tinakda ng korte, dun sa owner. Okay. As the administrator. Article 587. If the usufructuary who has not given security claims by virtue of a promise under oath the delivery of the furniture necessary for his use and that he and his family will be allowed to live in a house included in the usufruct, the court may grant this petition after due consideration of the facts of the case. Pero madalang ito, binabasa lang natin tong usufructuary. The same rule shall be observed with respect to implements, tools, and other movable property necessary for an industry or vocation in which he is engaged. If the owner does not wish that certain articles be sold because of their artistic worth or because they have a sentimental value, he may demand their delivery to him upon his giving security for the payment of the legal interest on their appraised value. Okay. Article 588. After the security has been given by the usufructuary, he shall have a right to all the proceeds and benefits from the day on which, in accordance with the title constituting the usufruct, he should have commenced to receive them. Article 589. The usufructuary shall take care of the things given in usufruct as a good father of a family. Ibig sabihin with diligence and due care. Okay, yun ang ibig sabihin. Article 590. A usufructuary who alienates or leases his right of usufruct shall answer for any damage which the things in usufruct may suffer through the fault or negligence of the person who substitutes him. O, kunwari ako, usufructuary mo ako, inalienate ko, ipinaupa ko sa iba. O, ikaw na muna ang mag-usufruct dito, ipinapasa ko sa iyo itong karapatan ko maging usufructuary. Magiging liable ako sa mga damages na magagawa nung pumalit sa akin na usufructuary na nakasama doon sa pag-aari mo. Article 591. If the usufruct be constituted on a flock or herd of livestock, the usufructuary shall be obliged to replace with the young thereof the animals that die each year from natural causes or are lost due to the rapacity of beasts of prey. Ayan. Kailangan mong palitan. Yung mga mawawala o mamamatay. If the animals on which the usufruct is constituted should all perish without the fault of the usufructuary on account of some contagious disease or any other uncommon event, the usufructuary shall fulfill his obligation by delivering to the owner the remains which may have been saved from the misfortune. Should the herd or flock perish in part, also by accident, and without the fault of the usufructuary, the usufruct shall continue on the part saved, period. Should the usufruct be on sterile animals, it shall be considered with respect to its effects as though constituted on fungible things. So, ang usufructuary dito, yung kumbaga, naglilis, kumbaga, para lang mas maintindihan natin, yung nangungupahan, yung usufruct, siya yung may-ari ng lupa na subject to the agreement of the usufructuary. Article 592, the usufructuary is obliged to make the ordinary repairs needed by the thing given in usufruct. By ordinary repairs are understood such as are required by the wear and tear due to the natural use of the thing and are indispensable for its preservation. Diba nga sinasabi yung usufructuary may obligasyon siya na panatilihin, na i-maintain yung subject ng usufructuary. Should the usufructuary fail to make them after demand by the owner, the latter may make them at the expense of the usufructuary. Article 593, extraordinary repairs shall be at the expense of the owner. The usufructuary is obliged to notify the owner when the need for such repairs is urgent. Article 594, if the owner should make the extraordinary repairs, he shall have a right to demand of the usufructuary the legal interest on that amount expended for the time that the usufruct lasts. Should he not make them when they are indispensable for the preservation of the thing, the usufructuary may make them, but he shall have a right to demand of the owner, at the termination of the usufruct, the increase in value which the immovable may have acquired by reason of repairs. Article 595, the owner may construct any works and make any improvements of which the immovable in usufruct is susceptible, or make new plantings thereon if it be rural, provided that such acts do not cause a diminution in the value of the usufruct or prejudice the right of the usufructuary. Dami pa nito ah. Okay. Article 596, the payment of annual charges and taxes and of those considered as a lien or claim on the fruits shall be at the expense of the usufructuary for all the time that the usufruct lasts. Article 597, the taxes which during the usufruct may be imposed directly on the capital shall be at the expense of the owner. If the latter has paid them, the usufructuary shall pay him the proper interest on the sums which may have been paid in that character. And if the said sums have been advanced by the usufructuary, he shall recover the amount thereof at the termination of the usufruct. Article 598, if the usufruct be constituted on the whole or on the whole of a patrimony, and if at the time of its constitution the owner has debts, the provisions of Articles 758 and 759 relating to donations shall be applied, both with respect to the maintenance of the usufruct and to the obligation of the usufructuary to pay such debts. The same rules shall be applied in case the owner is obliged at the time the usufruct is constituted to make periodical payments, even if there should be no known capital. Okay. Napag-usapan na natin nung nakaraan yung patrimony, di ba? Article 599, patrimony, ulitin natin, ibigla mong sabihin yan, yung mga usually yan yung mga patrimonial lands na ginagamit ng mga local government units, ganyan. O kunwari may isang tao namatay, walang tagapagmana, subject to escheat proceedings, nakuha ito ng lokal na pamahalaan. Okay, yun, patrimonial land yun. Article 599, the usufructuary may claim any matured credits which form a part of the usufruct if he has given or gives the proper security. If he has been excused from giving security or has been able to give it, or if that given is not sufficient, he shall need the authorization of the owner or of the court in default thereof to collect such credits. The usufructuary who has given security may use the capital he has collected in any manner he may deem proper. The usufructuary who has not given security shall invest the said capital at interest upon agreement with the owner. Mahalaga lang tandaan dito yung agreement with the owner yung usufructuary tsaka yung agreement na owner. In default of such agreement, with judicial authorization, and in every case with the security sufficient to preserve the integrity of the capital in usufruct. Article 600, the usufructuary of a mortgaged immovable shall not be obliged to pay the debt for the security of which the mortgage was constituted. Siyempre, hindi naman siya yung owner eh. Should the immovable be attached or sold judicially for the payment of the debt, the owner shall be liable to the usufructuary for whatever the latter may lose by reason thereof. Article 601, the usufructuary shall be obliged to notify the owner of any act of a third person of which he may have knowledge that may be prejudicial to the rights of ownership, and he shall be liable should he not do so for damages as if they had been caused through his own fault. So, para bang yung nagli-lease, kunwari, sa lote namin, obligasyon niyang i-inform kami as owners na, uy, merong nagtatry mag-squat doon sa lote ninyo, may nagbabakod na kain yung portion ng lote nyo. Pag hindi ginawa ng usufructuary yun doon sa owner, it's as if siya ang nag-cause ng damage na yon. So, obligasyon yun ng isang usufructuary. Article 602, the expenses, costs, and liabilities in suits brought with regard to the usufruct shall be borne by the usufructuary. Okay? Chapter 4, ito mas maiintindihan pa natin lalo yung usufructuary kasi paliliwanag dito yung extinguishment of usufruct. Article 603, usufruct is extinguished, number 1, by the death of the usufructuary unless a contrary intention clearly appears, number 2, by the expiration of the period for which it was constituted, or by the fulfillment of any resolutory condition provided in the title creating the usufruct, number 3, by merger of the usufruct and ownership in the same person, number 4, by renunciation of the usufructuary. Parang kontrata rin siya, no? Number 5, by the total loss of the thing in usufruct. Number 6, by the termination of the right of the person constituting the usufruct. And number 7, by prescription. Article 604, if the thing given in usufruct should be lost only in part, the right shall continue on the remaining part. Article 605, usufruct cannot be constituted in favor of a town, corporation, or association for more than 50 years. Hindi pa pwede ito. If it has been constituted and before the expiration of such period, the town is abandoned or the corporation or association is dissolved, the usufruct shall be extinguished by reason thereof. So, hindi daw po pwedeng pumasok sa isang usufruct agreement ang isang korporasyon, association, o town nang lalagpas sa 50 years. Article 606, a usufruct granted for the time that may elapse before a third person attains a certain age shall subsist for the number of years specified, even if the third person should die before the period expires, unless such usufruct has been expressly granted only in consideration of the existence of such person. Article 607, if the usufruct is constituted on immovable property of which a building forms part, and the latter should be destroyed in any manner whatsoever, the usufructuary shall have a right to make use of the land and the materials. The same rule shall be applied if the usufruct is constituted on a building, only the same should be destroyed. But in such a case, if the owner should wish to construct another building, he shall have a right to occupy the land and to make use of the materials, being obliged to pay to the usufructuary during the continuance of the usufruct the interest upon the sum equivalent to the value of the land and of materials. Okay? Article 608, if the usufructuary shares with the owner the insurance of the tenement given in usufruct, the former shall, in case of loss, continue in the enjoyment of the new building should one be constructed. Ayan, mananatili yung building sa owner sakaling magtapos yung kanilang usufruct, or shall receive the interest on the insurance indemnity if the owner does not wish to rebuild. Should the usufructuary have refused to contribute to the insurance, the owner insuring the tenement alone, the latter shall receive the full amount of the insurance indemnity in case of loss, saving always the right granted to the usufructuary in the preceding article. Okay. Lagi naman may karapatan pa rin si usufructuary, pero may karapatan din si owner. Okay. Article 609, should the thing in usufruct be expropriated for public use, the owner shall be obliged either to replace it with another thing of the same value and of similar conditions, or to pay the usufructuary the legal interest on the amount of the indemnity for the whole period of the usufruct. Okay? Kasi kunwari, kunwari land, yung subject ng expropriation. So yung owner, may obligasyon siya kay usufructuary na palitan ito. If the owner chooses the latter alternative, he shall give security for the payment of the interest. Article 610. A usufruct is not extinguished by bad use of the thing in usufruct. But if the abuse should cause considerable injury to the owner, the latter may demand that the thing be delivered to him, binding himself to pay annually to the usufructuary the net proceeds of the same after deducting the expenses and the compensation which may be allowed him for its administration. Article 611. A usufruct constituted in favor of several persons, living at the time of its constitution, shall not be extinguished until death of the last survivor. Article 612. Upon the termination of the usufruct, the thing in usufruct shall be delivered to the owner without prejudice to the right of retention pertaining to the usufructuary or his heirs for taxes and extraordinary expenses which should be reimbursed, period. After the delivery has been made, the security or mortgage shall be cancelled. Okay, so doon nagtatapos yung provision ng usufructuary. Pero maghanap tayo, baka makakita tayo sa internet ng magandang kahulugan pa. Okay? Ang sabi lamang kasi dito, the right to enjoy the use and advantages of another's property short of the destruction or waste of its substance. Okay? Parang ganun din, nasabi na ito karapatan ng isang tao na i-enjoy yung pag-aari ng ibang tao nang hindi mo ito sisirain. Okay? Oh, how does a usufruct work? Sabi rito, a usufruct is the right to use and enjoy property over a certain period. It is not ownership. Kaya nga kanina, di ba, magkaiba iba yung owner, iba yung parang nangungupahan sa kanya to, parang ganun. Pero iba ang konsepto. The person who owns the property is known as the bare dominium holder. Okay. The person who lives in the property will need to maintain the property and pay the rates and taxes. Okay. Pero sa dito sa mundo parang lease lang rent lease, ganun na lang 'di ba? Well, anyway, sandali lamang. Hello. Ayan no, a message from Sun Cellular. Mobile number of 9. Okay. Okay. Wait natin. Okay, so tayo magbabalik. Okay. Magtungo naman tayo sa Title 7 of Book 2 pa rin ng Civil Code of the Philippines. Title 7, Easements of Servitudes. Okay. Okay, Chapter 1, Easements in General. Section 1, Different Kinds of Easements. Okay, sisimula ang Title 7 ng Book 2 sa Article 613 ng Civil Code of the Philippines. Article 613, an easement or servitude is an encumbrance imposed upon an immovable for the benefit of another immovable belonging to a different owner. The immovable in favor of which the easement is established is called the dominant estate. That which is subject thereto, the servient estate. Okay, so ano muna yung encumbrance? Sabi niya, an easement or servitude is an encumbrance. Ano ibig sabihin ng encumbrance para lamang alam natin? Okay, encumbrance, a burden or impediment. Okay? Merong burden. Okay, merong harang kumbaga. Parang ganoon. Sa batas daw, a mortgage or other charge on property or assets, yan. Example siya ng encumbrance. Sabi pa rito, an encumbrance is a claim against a property by a party that is not the owner. Hindi siya owner, pero meron siyang claim sa property mo. The most common types daw ng encumbrance apply to real estate. These include mortgages, na isanla siya. So, hindi pa, kunwari ako, isinanla ko yung ari-arian ko, hindi naman ikaw may-ari niyan, pero may claim ka kasi legally sinanla ko sa iyo eh. Or property tax claims, yan. Encumbrance yan. Okay, so naintindihan na natin ang ibig sabihin ng encumbrance. O ngayon, magbasa tayo ulit. Sabi niya, the immovable in favor of which the easement is established is called the dominant estate. Okay, so pabor sa kanya yung easement, siya yung dominant estate. Servient estate naman yung tawag doon sa subject ng easement. Okay, yung hindi sa kanya, hindi pumapabor sa kanya. Okay. Article 614, servitudes o yung ito nga yan, easement or servitude. Servitudes may also be established for the benefit of a community or of one or more persons to whom the encumbered estate does not belong. Siguro, pwede nating in layman's term, madaling isipin dito yung right of way siguro. Ganyan. Article 615, easements may be continuous or discontinuous, apparent or non-apparent. Continuous easements are those the use of which is or may be incessant without the intervention of any act of man. Okay? Ano ibig sabihin ng incessant? Para lang alam natin. Ibig sabihin ito ay continuing without pause or interruption, walang humpay, or something regarded as unpleasant, continuing without pause or interruption, walang humpay. Yun ang ibig sabihin. So, ulitin natin basahin. Easements may be continuous. Sabi rito, continuous easements are those the use of which is or may be incessant or continuous. Sa Tagalog, walang humpay, without the intervention of any act of man. Okay? Discontinuous easements are those which are used at intervals and depend upon the acts of man. So, common sense, medyo maano natin, continuous, walang humpay na ginagamit ng walang ginagawa yung tao without the act of man. Discontinuous, by interval lang siya ginagamit and depends upon the acts of man. Apparent easements are those which are made known and are continually kept in view by external signs that reveal the use and enjoyment of the same. Non-apparent easements are those which show no external indication of their existence. Article 616, easements are also positive or negative. A positive easement is one which imposes upon the owner of the servient estate the obligation of allowing something to be done or of doing it himself, and the negative easement that which prohibits the owner of the servient estate from doing something which he could lawfully do if the easement did not exist. So, ulitin natin, positibong easement daw is one which imposes upon the owner of the servient estate the obligation of allowing something to be done or doing it himself. Parang ikaw may-ari ng lote na yan, hindi ako makadaan. Bigyan mo akong daan dyan. Or a negative easement that which prohibits the owner. Yung binabayaran yung owner. Huwag mong anuhin yan, tambakan yan, hindi ako makakadaan. Baka ganun yung logic, no? Article 619, easements are inseparable from the estate to which they actively or passively belong. Article 618, easements are indivisible. If the servient estate is divided between two or more persons, the easement is not modified and each of them must bear it on the part which corresponds to him. Hati-hati kayo. You should bear it. Diba? Kunwari, tatlo kayo may-ari ng lupa, apektado ito, kailangan yung bigyan ng daan ako, kunwari. O equally kayo. If it is the dominant estate that is divided between two or more persons, each of them may use the easement in its entirety without changing the place of its use or making it more burdensome in any other way. Okay. So kung yung servient estate, yung kawawang estate, siya yung magbibigay daan eh. Dapat tulungan yung may-ari ng servient estate na yan. Ganon din naman doon sa dominant estate kasi yung dominant estate ang makikinabang eh. So wag natin gawing mas burdensome, okay, para sa servient estate o para sa ating mga sarili rin. Article 619, easements are established either by law or by will of the owners. The former are called legal and the latter voluntary easements. Okay. So pag-establish ng law ito or pag in-establish ng law na kailangan paraanin nyo sila, kunwari, yun ay called legal easements. Yun namang nakalagay sa will ng owner. Kunwari, namatay yung isang lalaki, meron siyang will, nakalagay sa last will and testament niya, maglaan kayo ng daan para madaanan nilang ganyan. Yun yung voluntary easement. Section 2, modes of acquiring easements. Article 620, continuous and apparent easements are acquired either by virtue of a title or by prescription of 10 years. Ayan Either may titulo ka o prescription of 10 years. Article 621, in order to acquire by prescription the easements referred to in the preceding article, the time of... Okay, tuloy natin. Balikan natin Article 621. In order to acquire by prescription the easements referred to in the preceding article, the time of possession shall be computed thus: in positive easements from the day on which the owner of the dominant estate or the person who may have made use of the easement commenced to exercise it upon the servient estate. And in negative easements from the day on which the owner of the dominant estate forbade by an instrument acknowledged before a notary public the owner of the servient estate from executing an act which would be lawful without the easement. Okay. Article 622, continuous non-apparent easements and discontinuous ones, whether apparent or not, may be acquired only by virtue of a title. Okay. Article 623, the absence of a document or proof showing the origin of an easement which cannot be acquired by prescription may be cured by a deed of recognition by the owner, by the owner of the servient estate or by final judgment. So hindi nagkasundo, hindi naman na-recognize ng servient estate yung mapeperwisyong estate, mapeperwisyo pero siya yung dapat magbigay by a final judgment. Article 624, the existence of an apparent sign of easement between two estates established or maintained by the owner of both shall be considered should either of them be alienated as title in order that the easement may continue actively and passively unless at the time the owner of the two estates is divided, the contrary should be provided in the title of conveyance of either of them, or the sign aforesaid should be removed before the execution of the deed. This provision shall also apply in case of the division of a thing owned in common by two or more persons. Article 625, upon the establishment of an easement, all the rights necessary for its use are considered granted. Article 626, the owner of the dominant estate cannot use the easement except for the benefit of the immovable originally contemplated. Neither can he exercise the easement in any other manner than that previously established. Doon na tayo sa Section 3. Rights and obligations of the owners of the dominant and servient estates. Article 627. The owner of the dominant estate may make at his own expense on the servient estate any works necessary for the use and preservation of the servitude, but without altering it or rendering it more burdensome. Yung dominant estate, pwede siya magmalasakit na, sige, since padadaanin mo na ako, ayusin ko na para hindi ka rin maperwisyo, hindi na siya burdensome sa'yo. For this purpose, you shall notify the owner of the servient estate. Mahalaga po yun, hindi ka pwedeng basta kikilos sa hindi mo lote. You shall notify the owner of the servient estate and shall choose the most convenient time and manner so as to cause the least inconvenient to the owner of the servient estate. Article 628, should there be several dominant estates, the owners of all of them shall be obliged to contribute to the expenses referred to in the preceding article. O, lahat kayo makikinabang, maraming iba-ibang owners ng dominant estates na nangangailangan, mag-contribute kayo in proportion to the benefits which each may derive from the work. Anyone who does not wish to contribute may exempt himself by renouncing the easement for the benefit of the others. So, ayaw ko mag-contribute, pero hindi rin ako makikinabang dyan. Kayo na lang makinabang. Parang ganon. If the owner of the servient estate should make use of the easement in any manner whatsoever, he shall also be obliged to contribute to the expenses in the proportion stated, saving an agreement to the contrary. May kasulatan kayo. Kasi ako, kunwari, ako yung mapeperwish yung lote ko para pagbigyan yung lote mo, makadaan ka. O, pero, in a way, kunwari, gagamitin ko rin yung daan na yun for other purpose. O, di magawa tayong kasulatan na lahat tayo makikinabang doon. Mag-contribute tayo para sa panlahatan nating kapakinabangan. Article 629, the owner of the servient estate cannot impair o hindi niya pwedeng harangan in any manner whatsoever the use of the servitude. Nevertheless, if by reason of the place originally assigned or of the manner established for the use of the easement, the same should become very inconvenient to the owner of the servient estate or should prevent him from making any important works, repairs, or improvements thereon, it may be changed at his expense, provided he offers another place or manner equally convenient and in such a way that no injury is caused thereby to the owner of the dominant estate or to those who may have a right to the use of the easement. Article 630, the owner of the servient estate retains the ownership of the portion on which the easement is established and may use the same in such a manner as not to affect the exercise of the easement. Section 4, modes of extinguishment of easements. O, ito. Paano ba may extinguish, mawawala ang easement? Article 631. Easements are extinguished, number 1, by merger in the same person of the ownership of the dominant and servant estates. Nag-merge na sila. Kunwari, kinasal. Ito, at saka ito, kinasal. O, atin na parebuho yan. Yun. Number 2, by non-user for 10 years. With respect to discontinuous easements, this period shall be computed from the day on which they ceased to be used. And with respect to continuous easements, from the day on which an act contrary to the same took place. Number 3, when either or both of the estates fall into such condition that the easement cannot be used, but it shall revive if the subsequent condition of the estates or either of them should again permit its use. Unless when the use becomes possible, sufficient time for prescription has elapsed in accordance with the provisions of the preceding number. Number 4, by the expiration of the term or the fulfillment of the condition, if the easement is temporary or conditional. Number 5, by the renunciation of the owner of the dominant estate. Number 6, by the redemption agreed upon between the owners of the dominant and servient estates. Article 632, the form or manner of using the easement may prescribe as the easement itself and in the same way. Article 633, if the dominant estate belongs to several persons in common, the use of the easement by any one of them prevents prescription with respect to others. Tungo naman tayo sa Chapter 2, Legal Easements. Section 1, Article 634, easements imposed by law have for their object either public use or the interest of private persons. Article 635, all matters concerning easements established for public or communal use shall be governed by the special laws and regulations relating thereto, and in the absence thereof, by the provisions of this title. Article 636, easements established by law in the interest of private persons or for private use shall be governed by the provisions of this title without prejudice o walang harang to the provisions of general or local laws and ordinances for the general welfare. These easements may not be modified by agreement of the interested parties whenever the law does not prohibit it or no injury is suffered by a third person. Okay? Okay, so ano naman to? Tingnan natin yung easement of right of way. Ito yung mas madali natin intindihin, easement of right of way. Pero iba-iba po ang uri ng easement. Okay. Easement of right of way, Article 649, the owner or any person who, by virtue of a real right, may cultivate or use any immovable which is surrounded by other immovables pertaining to other persons and without adequate outlet to a public highway, is entitled to demand the right of way through the neighboring estates after payment of the proper indemnity. So, pwedeng hindi ka makadaan, nasa likod yung lote mo, wala kang ibang daan. Hindi po pwede yung wala ka lang daan, gusto mo lang doon, may daan namang iba. Hindi po pwede, wala kang ibang daan. Kailangan mong makisuyo sa mga entitled ka na makisuyo sa katabing mga lote na magkaroon ka ng daan, provided na magbabayad ka of the proper indemnity. Should this easement be established in such a manner that its use may be continuous for all the needs of the dominant estate, establishing a permanent passage, the indemnity shall consist of the value of the land occupied and the amount of the damage caused to the servient estate. In case the right-of-way is limited to the necessary passage for the cultivation of the estate surrounded by others and for the gathering of its crops through the servient estate without a permanent way, the indemnity shall consist in the payment of the damage caused by such encumbrance. This easement is not compulsory if the isolation of the immovable is due to the proprietor's own act. So, yun yung sinasabi ko, hindi ito compulsory kung meron ka namang ibang daan o naharangan yung daan dahil sa sarili mong kagagawan. Article 650, the easement of right-of-way shall be established at the point least prejudicial o yung pinakakonti ang perwisyo to the servient estate, and insofar as consistent with this rule, where the distance from the dominant estate to a public highway may be shortest. Article 651, the width of the easement of right-of-way shall be that which is sufficient for the needs of the dominant estate and may accordingly be changed from time to time. Yun ang sinabi. So, kung iskinita kayo, nangailangan ka, may kotse ka, makakapasok ka naman, may space doon, hindi lang makapasok yung kotse mo. Pwedeng, sabi rito, yung width, yung easement, shall be that which is sufficient for the needs of the dominant estate. Yung nangangailangan, kailangan sapat sa pangangailangan niya. Article 652, whenever a piece of land acquired by sale, exchange, or partition is surrounded by other estates of the vendor, exchanger, or co-owner, he shall be obliged to grant a right-of-way without indemnity. Okay, so ulitin natin yan. Whenever a piece of land acquired by sale, binili mo, nag-exchange kayo o pinaghati-hatian nyo, is surrounded by other estates. Noong nagbebenta, yung nagbebenta shall be obliged to grant a right-of-way na walang bayad. So, paano mapakikinabangan yung loteng ibinili mo kung hindi kanya bibigyan ng daan? In case of a simple donation, the donor shall be indemnified by the donee for the establishment of the right-of-way. Kunwari, nag-donate ako sa iyo, ako yung donor naman. Ikaw naman bayad sa akin ng right-of-way. Nag-donate na nga ako sa iyo Yun naman ang ibig sabihin nito. Article 653, in the case of the preceding article, If it is the land of the grantor that becomes isolated, he may demand a right-of-way after paying indemnity. However, the donor shall not be liable for indemnity. Siyempre, hindi talaga liable yung donor. Nagbigay na nga eh. Article 654, if the right-of-way is permanent, the necessary repairs shall be made by the owner of the dominant estate. Ulitin natin, dominant estate yung nangangailangan na makadaan ng right-of-way. A proportionate share of the taxes shall be reimbursed by said owner to the proprietor of the servient estate. Article 655, if the right-of-way granted to a surrounded estate ceases to be necessary because its owner has joined it to another abutting on a public road, the owner of the servient estate may demand that the easement be extinguished, returning what he may have received by way of indemnities. The interest on the indemnity shall be deemed to be in payment for rent for the use of the easement. It's as if nirentahan mo yung easement. Ayun, oo. Kumbaga, hindi mo na kailangan itong daan na ito kasi may iba ng daan. Okay, na ginawa yung gobyerno. So, bayaran mo na lang ako, babawiin ko na to kasi hindi mo na kailangan itong daan na ito. It's as if nirentahan mo na lang ito. The same rule shall be applied in case a new road is opened giving access to the isolated estate. Ayan yung ibig sabihin. In both cases, the public highway must substantially meet the needs of the dominant estate in order that the easement may be extinguished. Article 656. If it be indispensable for the construction, repair, improvement, alteration, or beautification of a building, to carry materials through the estate of another, or to raise therein scaffolding or other objects necessary for the work, the owner of such estate shall be obliged to permit the act after receiving payment of the proper indemnity for the damage caused. So, kunwari, meron nagpapatayo sa kapitbahay namin sa likod. Hindi nila magagawa yung mga ginagawa nilang construction kundi sila aapak doon sa aming alulod. Inside gutter kami. So, dapat na nagbabayad sila ng damages doon sa mga ipinangre-repair namin sa alulod namin every time na inaapakan nila ito. Okay? Article 657, easements of the right-of-way for the passage of livestock known as animal path, animal trail, or any other in those for watering places, resting places, and animal folds shall be governed by the ordinances and regulations relating thereto, and in the absence thereof, by the usages and customs of the place. Without prejudice to rights legally acquired, the animal path shall not exceed, in any case, the width of 75 meters, and the animal trail that of 37 meters and 50 centimeters. Whenever it is necessary to establish a compulsory easement of the right-of-way or for a watering place for animals, the provisions of this section and those of Article 640 and 641 shall be observed. In this case, the width shall not exceed 10 meters. Okay? 10 metro. Section 4, easement of party wall. Article 658, the easement of party wall shall be governed by the provisions of this title, by the local ordinances and customs insofar as they do not conflict with the same, and by the rules of co-ownership. Ayan Party wall. Okay, para mas maintindihan natin, Article 659, the existence of an easement of party wall is presumed unless there is a title or exterior sign or proof to the contrary. Number 1, in dividing walls of adjoining buildings up to the point of common elevation. In the dividing walls of gardens or yards situated in cities, towns, or in rural communities. And number 3, in fences, walls, and live hedges dividing rural lands. So, ang tama dito is up to the point of common elevation, no? Sa kapitbahay ko, dapat ganun ang party wall. Article 660, if it is understood that there is an exterior sign contrary to the easement of party wall, number 1, whenever in the dividing wall of buildings there is a window or opening, number 2, whenever the dividing wall is on one side, straight and plumb on all its basement, and on the other, it has similar conditions on the upper part, but the lower part slants or projects outward. Number 3, whenever the entire wall is built within the boundaries of one of the estates. Number 4, whenever the dividing wall bears the burden of the binding beams, floors, and roof frame of one of the buildings but not those of the others. Number 5, Whenever the dividing wall between courtyards, gardens, and tenements is constructed in such a way that the coping sheds the water upon only one of the estates. Naku, coping sheds. Naku, mahirap nito yung kapitbahay namin. Binabagsak nila dun sa aming gutter yung kanilang alulod. Sus Mariosep. Number 6, whenever the dividing wall being built of masonry has stepping stones which at certain intervals project from the surface on one side only but not on the other. Number 7, whenever lands enclosed by fences or live hedges adjoin others which are not enclosed. Period. In all these cases, the ownership of the walls, fences, or hedges shall be deemed to belong exclusively to the owner of the property or tenement, which has in its favor the presumption based on any one of these signs. Article 661. Ditches or drains open between two estates are also presumed as common to both if there is no title or sign showing the contrary. There is a sign contrary to the part ownership whenever the earth or dirt removed to open the ditch or to clean it is only on one side thereof, in which case the ownership of the ditch shall belong exclusively to the owner of the land having this exterior sign in its favor. Article 662. The cost of repairs and construction of party walls and the maintenance of fences, live hedges, ditches, and drains owned in common shall be borne by all the owners of the lands or tenements having the party wall in their favor in proportion to the right of each. Nevertheless, any owner may exempt himself from contributing to this charge by renouncing his part ownership except when the party wall supports a building belonging to him. Article 663. If the owner of a building supported by a party wall desires to demolish the building, he may also renounce his part ownership of the wall, but the cost of all repairs and work necessary to prevent any damage which the demolition may cause to the party wall on this occasion only shall be borne by him. Article 664. Every owner may increase the height of the party wall, doing at his own expense by paying for any damage which may be caused by the work, even though such damage be temporary. The expense of maintaining the wall in part newly raised or deepened at its foundation shall also be paid for by him. And in addition, the indemnity for the increased expenses which may be necessary for the preservation of the party wall by reason of the greater height or depth which has been given it. If the party wall cannot bear the increased height, the owner desiring to raise it shall be obliged to reconstruct it as at his own expense, and if for this purpose it be necessary to make it thicker, he shall give the space required from his own land. Article 665. The other owners who have not contributed in giving increased height, depth, or thickness to the wall may nevertheless acquire the right of part ownership therein by paying proportionally the value of the work at the time of the acquisition of the land used for its increased thickness. Article 666. Every part owner of a party wall may use it in proportion to the right he may have in co-ownership without interfering with the common and respective uses by the other co-owners. So kami, kunwari, nagpagawa kami ng bakod sa kapitbahay namin. Sa bakod na yun, ikinabit nila yung bahay ng aso nila. Hinayaan na lang namin, hindi naman nakakaperwisyo sa amin. So, okay. Section 5, Easement of Light and View. Article 667, no part owner may, without the consent of the others, open through the party wall any window or aperture of any kind. Okay? Wala raw part owner kung hindi siya kumukuha ng consent of the others. May open dun sa party wall ng bintana, no? Article 668, the period of prescription for the acquisition of an easement of light and view shall be counted, number 1, from the time of the opening of the window, if it is through a party wall, or number 2, from the time of the formal prohibition upon the proprietor of the adjoining land or tenement if the window is through a wall on the dominant estate. Okay? So, kailangan lang nito, pag naperwisyo ka, sabihin mo agad na, "Uy, huwag ka magbukas ng bintana dyan." Kundi maaari tayo magkaroon ng kaso. Article 669, when distances in Article 670 are not observed, The owner of a wall which is not party wall adjoining a tenement or piece of land belonging to another can make make in it openings to admit light at the height of the ceiling joints or immediately under the ceiling and of the size of 30 centimeters square, and in every case with an iron grating embedded in the wall and with a wire screen. Nevertheless, the owner of the tenement or property adjoining the wall in which the openings are made can close them should he require part ownership thereof if there be no stipulation to the contrary. He can also obstruct them by constructing a building on his land or by raising a wall thereon contiguous to that having such openings unless an easement of light has been acquired. An easement of light, ito yung nagbibigay-daan ka na masinagang ka ng ilaw. Article 670, no windows, apertures, balconies, or other similar projections which afford a direct view upon or towards an adjoining land or tenement can be made without leaving a distance of 2 meters between the wall in which they are made and such contiguous property. Neither can side or oblique views upon or towards such conterminous property be had unless there be a distance of 60 centimeters. The non-observance of these distances does not give rise to prescription. Maganda pala, may kapitbahay kang vampira. Hindi niya kahit dikit-dikit kayong ganyan, wala siyang easement of light. Gusto niya yon. Article 671, the distance referred to in the preceding article, ibig sabihin ng preceding article dito, yung nagdaang article shall be measured in cases of direct views from the outer line of the wall when the openings do not project, from the outer line of the latter when they do, and in cases of oblique view from the dividing line between the two properties. Article 672, the provisions of Article 670 are not applicable to buildings separated by a public way or alley which is not less than 3 meters wide, subject to special regulations and local ordinances. Article 673, whenever by any title a right has been acquired to have direct views, balconies, or belvederes overlooking an adjoining property, the owner of the servient estate cannot build thereon at less than a distance of 3 meters to be measured in any manner provided in Article 671, period. Any stipulation permitting distance less than those prescribed in Article 670 is void. Okay. Kailangan 3 meters daw. So yung kapitbahay ko, may bintana siya rito, nakaharap sa amin. Pag nagpatayo ka ng bahay dito, kailangan 3 meters. Pero ayoko naman maglagay ng bintana dito, magkakakitaan kaming dalawa. So siguro hindi na lang dun. Siguro basta hindi nakatapat sa kanya. Section 6, Drainage of Buildings. Uy, ito yung mga alulot ba? Problema namin yan. Article 674, the owner of a building shall be obliged to construct its roof or covering in such manner that the rainwater shall fall on his own land or on a street or public place and not on the land of his neighbor, even though the adjacent land may belong to 2 or more persons, one of whom is the owner of the roof. Even if it should fall on his own land, the owner shall be obliged to collect the water in such a way as not to cause damage to the adjacent land or tenement. Article 675, the owner of a tenement or a piece of land subject to the easement of receiving water falling from roofs may build in such manner as to receive the water upon his own roof or give it another outlet in accordance with the local ordinances or customs and in such a way as not to cause any nuisance or damage whatever to the dominant estate. Article 676, whenever the yard or court of a house is surrounded by other houses and it is not possible to give an outlet through the house itself to the rainwater collected thereon, the establishment of an easement of drainage can be demanded, giving an outlet to the water at the point of the contiguous lands or tenements where its egress may be easiest, and establishing a conduit for the drainage in such manner as to cause the least damage to the servient estate after payment of the property indemnity. Section 7, intermediate distances and works for certain constructions and plantings. Article 677, haba pa. No constructions can be built or plantings made near fortified places or fortresses without compliance with the conditions required in special laws, ordinances, and regulations relating thereto. Article 678, no person shall build any aqueduct, well, sewer, furnace, forge, chimney, stable, depository of corrosive substances, machinery or factory which by reason of its nature or products is dangerous or noxious, without observing the distances prescribed by the regulations and customs of the place, and without making the necessary protective works, subject in regard to the manner thereof, to the conditions prescribed by such regulations. These prohibitions cannot be altered or renounced by stipulation on the part of the adjoining proprietors. Period. In the absence of regulation, such precautions shall be taken as may be considered necessary in order to avoid any damage to the neighboring lands or tenements. Okay. Kailangan mo rin kasing konsidera yung kapitbahay mo, hindi lang ikaw. Article 679, no trees shall be planted near a tenement or piece of land belonging to another, except at the distance authorized by the ordinances or customs of the place, and in the absence thereof, at a distance of at least 2 meters from the diving line of the estates, if tall trees are planted, and at a distance of at least 50 centimeters if shrubs or small trees are planted. Every landowner shall have the right to demand that trees hereafter planted at a shorter distance from his land or tenement be uprooted. The provisions of this article also apply to trees which have grown spontaneously. Dami naming puno. Wait lang. Ano to? Excuse me lang, may tumatawag lamang. Okay, ako yung nagbabalik. Article 680, if the branches of any tree should extend over a neighboring estate, tenement, garden, or yard, the owner of the latter shall have the right to demand that they be cut off insofar as they may spread over his property, and if it be the roots of a neighboring tree which should penetrate into the land of another, the latter may cut them off himself within his property. So, ang keyword lamang dito, within our property. So, kung lumagpas, ito yung bakod mo, lumagpas na sa property mo yung sanga or yung ugat, pwede mong putulin. Pero hindi pa pwedeng yung, andito naman sa property niya yung puno, tatawid ka pang ganyan, sa property niya na yun nakalawit lang sa'yo, yun lang ang pwede mong putulin. Hindi pa pwedeng pakialaman yung papasok ka pa dun sa loob ng bakod niya, doon ka magtataga. Nangyari sa amin yan dito, sinita ko eh. Diba? Yung lumalawit lang sa inyo, yun lang ang pwede nyong putulin. Article 681, fruits naturally falling upon the adjacent land belong to the owner of the said land. Kaya yung saging ng kapitbahay namin, ginanon nila sa bakod nila kasi baka mahulog sa amin. Amin na yun eh. Section 8, easement against nuisance. Article 682, every building or piece of land is subject to the easement which prohibits the proprietor or possessor from committing nuisance through noise, jarring, offensive odor, smoke, heat, dust, water, glare, and other causes. Article 683, yung kapitbahay ko medyo nuisance eh, nagpapatugtog siya na maingay. Pero ang ginagawa niya lang, lalakasan niya lang for ilang seconds, naglanghina niya rin kasi alam niya istorbo eh. Pinapasikat niya lang siguro yung sound speaker niya. Minsan maganda rin naman yung kanta niya. Tapos biglang ihina rin. Minsan nanonood ako ng TV, yun na yung maririnig ko. Tapos biglang hina. Parang pinapasikat niya lang na, oy, malakas ang aking sound system. Article 683, subject to zoning, health, police, and other laws and regulations, factories and shops may be maintained provided the least possible annoyance is caused to the neighborhood. Section 9, lateral and subjacent support. Article 684, no proprietor shall make such excavations upon his land as should deprive any adjacent land or building of sufficient lateral or subjacent support. Di ka pwede maghukay na makakaperwisyo. Basta makakaperwisyo ka sa iba, yun na lang isipin mo, hindi pwede. Article 685, any stipulation or testamentary provision allowing excavations that cause danger to an adjacent land or building shall be void. Article 686, the legal easement of lateral and subjacent support is not only for buildings standing at the time the excavations are made, but also for constructions that may be erected. Article 687, any proprietor intending to make an excavation contemplated in the three preceding articles shall notify all owners of adjacent lands. Chapter 3, voluntary easements. Article 688, every owner of a tenement or piece of land may establish thereon the easements which he may deem suitable, and in the manner and form which he may deem best, provided he does not contravene the laws, public policy, or public order. Article 689, the owner of a tenement or piece of land, the usufruct of which belongs to another, may impose thereon, without the consent of the usufructuary, any servitudes which will not injure the right of usufruct. O binasa natin kanina yung usufructuary. Ako yung owner ng land, ikaw yung usufructuary. Ako yung owner, pwede ako mag-impose ng servitude o ng easement, basta hindi ka mapeperwisyo. Article 690, whenever the naked ownership of a tenement or piece of land belongs to one person and the beneficial ownership to another, no perpetual voluntary easement may be established thereon without the consent of both owners. Article 691, in order to impose an easement on an undivided tenement or piece of land, the consent of all the owners shall be required. The consent given by some only must be held in abeyance until the last one of all the co-owners shall have expressed his conformity. Kailangan sama-sama sila dito. But the consent given by one of the co-owners separately from the others shall bind the grantor and his successors not to prevent the exercise of the right granted. Siyempre, sumang-ayon ka na yan. Article 692, the title and in a proper case, the possession of an easement acquired by prescription shall determine the rights of the dominant estate and the obligations of the servient estate. In default thereof, the easement shall be governed by such provisions of this title as are applicable thereto. Article 693, if the owner of the servient estate should have bound himself upon the establishment of the easement to bear the cost of the work required for the use and prevention thereof, he may free himself from this obligation by renouncing his property to the owner of the dominant estate. Ito naman tayo sa Title 8, nuisance. Ito, konti lang to. Article 694, a nuisance is any act, omission, establishment, business condition of property or anything else which, number 1, injures or endangers the health or safety of others. Number 2, annoys or offends the senses. Number 3, shocks, defies, or disregards decency or morality. Number 4, obstructs or interferes with the free passage of any public highway or street or any body of water. Or number 5, hinders or impairs the use of property. Article 695. So, nuisance, something na nakakainis, pwede ka mag-file ng case laban dyan. Article 695, nuisance is either public or private. A public nuisance affects a community or neighborhood or any considerable number of persons, although the extent of the annoyance, danger, or damage upon individuals may be unequal. A private nuisance is one that is not included in the foregoing definition. So, hindi siya naisali. Article 696, every successive owner or possessor of property who fails or refutes to abate a nuisance in that property started by a former owner or possessor is liable therefore in the same manner as the one who created it. Article 697, the abatement of a nuisance does not preclude the right of any person injured to recover damages for its past existence. So, abatement, ang pagkakaalam ko dyan, yung tinanggal o tinapos mo na. O, pwede ka pa rin singilin sa dating damage na nagawa mo. Ang ibig sabihin ng abatement, tinapos mo na nga. Tama ako. The ending, reduction, or lessening of something. Diba? So itong kapitbahay kong araw-araw nagpapatugtog ng malakas pala, ano pala, nuisance pa rin siya. Charot. Kaya mo na, natitiis ko naman eh. Article 700, the district health officer shall take care that one or all of the remedies against the public nuisance are availed of. Articles, so yung mga district health officer, municipal doctor natin, pag may nuisance, kailangan yung suriin na, oops, against nga ito sa kalusugan. Okay. Kailangan ipasara ito. Ganyan. Kaya lang, kung bayaran lang din siya. Article 701. If a civil action is brought by reason of the maintenance of a public nuisance, such action shall be commenced by the city or municipal mayor. Paano kung mayor yung nuisance? Charot. DILG siguro, ano? So, si mayor pala pagka public nuisance. Article 702, the district health officer shall determine whether or not abatement without judicial proceedings is the best remedy against a public nuisance. Susuriin ng doktor kung itigil nyo ba to, okay na, o kasuhan natin. Yan. Article 703, a private person may file an action on account of a public nuisance if it is specially injurious to himself. Actually, meron akong kilala nakatira malapit sa isang bar. O, hindi sila makatulog sa ingay ng mga nagbibidyoke, bar. Hindi sumusunod dahil malakas yung may-ari ng bar. 'Di ba? 'Di ba? Problema sa health 'yun eh. Article 704, any private person may abate o ipatigil ang isang public nuisance which is especially injurious to him by removing or if necessary by destroying the thing which constitutes the same without committing a breach of the peace or doing unnecessary injury. Necessary lamang gawin to, number 1, that demand be first made upon the owner of possessor of the property to abate the nuisance. Mag-demand ka muna na tigilan nyo yung ginagawa nyong perwisyo. Hindi ka pwedeng sirain naman agad. Number 2, that such demand has been rejected. Ibig sabihin, nakiusap ka na wag magpatugtog yung kunwari, yung barangay ng pagkalakas-lakas o hindi nila pinakinggan. That the abatement be approved by the district health officer and executed with the assistance of the local police, na ang pagpapatigil ay inaprubahan dapat daw ng iyong municipal doctor at sinamahan kayo ng police para ipatigil ito. And number 4, that the value of the destruction does not exceed 3,000 pesos. So, yung ginawa mo lahat ng ito, hindi nila sinunod, sinira mo bilang isang private person, basta hindi lumagpas ng 3,000 yung nasira mo. Pero wag ka nang manira. Sundin mo na lang, magsumbong ka na lang sa opisyales. Article 705, the remedies against the public nuisance are number 1, a civil action, and number 2, abatement without judicial proceedings. Punta ka sa office of the mayor, magreklamo ka kung barangay ang nagpapatugtog ng malakas. Punta ka sa kapitbahay mo, i-inform mo siya na pakihina ang iyong music. Okay? Article 706, any person injured by a private nuisance may abate it by removing or if necessary by destroying the thing which constitutes the nuisance without committing a breach of the peace or doing unnecessary injury. Huwag mo nang gawin yan. Kung ako, magreklamo ka na lang. Article 707, a private person or a public official extrajudicially abating a nuisance shall be liable for damages. So, yan, if he causes unnecessary injury. And number 2, if an alleged nuisance is later declared by the courts to be not a real nuisance. So, okay, sandali na lang to. Basahin na natin. Na-repeal na ito pero basahin lang natin. Title 9, Registry of Property, Article 708. The Registry of Property has for its object the inscription or annotation of acts and contracts relating to the ownership and other rights over immovable property. Ito siguro Register of Deeds. Registry of Deeds, Article 709. The titles of ownership or of other rights or immovable property which are not duly inscribed or annotated in the Registry of Property shall not prejudice third persons. Article 710. The books in the Registry of Property shall be public for those who have a known interest in ascertaining the status of the immovables of real rights annotated or inscribed therein. And lastly, Article 711, for determining what titles are subject to inscription or annotation, as well as the form, effects, and cancellation of inscriptions and the annotations, the manner of keeping the books in the registry, and the value of the entries contained in said books, the provisions of the Mortgage Law, the Land Registration Act, and other special laws. Meron na yatang special law na nangangasiwa rito. Shall govern. Okay. Pero in the absence ng special law, ito pa rin ang mga ngasiwa. Kasi po yung mga caudal, yan yung backbone ng lahat ng batas na ipinapasa in relation to. Ganon. Okay? So, ayan, nagtapos na tayo sa buong book 2 ng book 2 from title 1 dun sa nakaraan nating live hanggang sa title 9 ngayon sa live natin. Natapos na natin ang buong book 2 ng Civil Code of the Philippines. Magbabalik tayo muli para sa book 3 and book 4. Tapusin natin, basahin natin lahat at subukan natin ipaliwanag next time. Kasama pa rin ang inyong Lolo Ray. Samahan niyo ako magpaliwanag, magbasa at magpaliwanag in layman's term. So God bless at ingat kayo palagi.